Welcome to Writers of the World. Today we're discussing living with Serenity as our panelists talk about what serenity means to them in today's world. With the difficult times everyone is facing, the topic of serenity is more important than ever, and our panelists are going to share some of their insights with us. If you could each please introduce yourselves.
Certainly. Hi, I'm Dr. Christine Ristaino, and my memoir, All the Silent Spaces About Overcoming Violence, is a 2020 Indie Reader Discovery Award winner and a 2019 Best Book Awards finalist in social change and women's issues. In addition to writing, I teach Italian language and literature at Emory University.
Hi, I'm Diane McPhail. I'm an artist, a writer, a therapist, and a minister. I am Dr. McPhail, but I don't go by that. My debut novel, The Abolitionist's Daughter, deals with three extraordinary women and their struggle for survival and stability in the very traumatic times around the Civil War. And it's gathered rave reviews and had extraordinary sales. And I'm writing a second. I now live in a restored old grist mill among all the machinery. And that's where I stay sane and serene.
Hi, I'm Anna Penenberg. I'm an author, a mother, and a healer. I work with individuals affected by trauma. My memoir, coming out on July 7th, is Dancing in the Narrows, about a mother-daughter multi-year odyssey through illness and self-discovery. I live in Topanga, California, and hike in the trails there to keep myself serene.
Hi, I'm Donna O'Donnell Figurski. I'm a speaker and the author of the award-winning memoir, Prisoners Without Bars, A Caregiver's Tale. It's a story about my husband who had a brain injury, and I've been the caregiver since 2005. I also host a radio show on the Brain Injury Radio Network.
Hi, I'm David Crow, author of The Pale-Faced Lie, a true story about a life of a child growing up in the Navajo Indian Reservation. I have my own government relations company in Washington, D.C. I've been working in the lobbying business for almost 40 years and living in McLean, Virginia, just outside of Washington.
Hi, I'm Lacey Pruitt. I'm an author of The High Performance Detox, and I'm also a yoga teacher. I'm passionate about healthy living. I'm a former Mrs. Texas, and I was born and raised in Texas, and I live in the Dallas area with my husband and our 2 dogs. I also have 2 grown stepchildren, and I'm passionate about animal rights and animal activism, and I try to volunteer in that area as much as I can.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. So I'd like to start by asking you how you achieve serenity in your daily lives.
Okay, I'll start. Serenity, wow, that's not an easy question. At the beginning of David's brain injury, it was nonstop work for me. He needed constant care. So there was not much time for me at all. And I would be working, coming home from teaching school, and then I would go right to being home and being on call for David for the rest of the evening. So I never really stopped to think about my needs. They weren't really important at that point. I was just worried so much about him. So I really don't suggest that is a good method of caregiving because it was totally overwhelming. Caregivers need me time. We all do, but caregivers especially need me time. And it kind of reminds me about the flight attendants in an airplane when they say, if in the case of cabin pressure, make sure you put on your oxygen mask first. And that before you help other people, and that's really good advice. I wish I had taken it, but it's really good advice. You have to take care of yourself before you can take care of anybody else. But when things, now we're 15 years later, and I'm still David's primary caregiver, but he can do a lot more things for himself, which allows me more me time. And so when things get out of control, and they sometimes do, I breathe. I try to just use the breathing techniques and count. I use a 6 count thing. So I breathe in for 6, breathe out for 6, you know, and just get calmed down, and it works. I also try to be mindful. I focus on my life at the moment, whatever's happening. I push away my worries. It's not easy to do, but you can try. Push them away for just a little while. And then I find mindfulness in my writing, which I do every day. And that takes me away into another zone. I try to meditate each day, and or find something pleasant, focus on something pleasant, and take myself away from the problem, either physically or mentally or both. And each summer, David and I go off to Santa Cruz, California for a couple of weeks to visit our son and daughter-in-law. And I often find myself on the bench at the bottom of 14th Street, breathing in the ocean, watching the pelicans go by and watching the surfers. And that's one of my happy places. And I think that's something that everybody needs to do, is to find some happy places to go to, and a place to regroup, to refresh, or to reboot yourself, as you can do on a computer. But I think that's really important.
Donna, I like what you said about caregivers, especially right now in the midst of COVID-19, when we're all trying to navigate a world that is unsettling. And a lot of people are caregivers at this moment, you know, sometimes to whole families. So I think your advice is really good. And I wanted to jump off and talk a bit about writing. You mentioned writing as one of the things that helps you, and we're all writers on this panel, so probably all of us do a bit of writing to make us feel serene. And I say that for me, writing gives me order. You know, I may be having the craziest day, and if I sit down and write, I feel peace automatically. It seems to just calm me down. It allows me to give order to the world, to create a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I can just, you know, I know if I'm feeling pretty stressed out, if I sit down for 20 minutes, I can really come up with something that has a beginning, middle, and an end. And usually it's just maybe something I was thinking about during the day, or some topic that helps me put order into the world or the day or the chaos. So writing for me is something that gives me peace and serenity.
As a therapist, and I was an art therapist, it's more than just, oh, this makes me feel better. It makes me feel better because it actually creates a different situation in the brain. Our creative activities, and we think of Serenity a lot of times, Lacey, like for you, like with yoga or meditation. Studies show that creative endeavors, pretty much all of them, and pretty much in equal measure, release what's called the 3 happy hormones in the brain. And I'm going to let Lacey list them for me.
Well, I agree with you, Diane, and that's really one of the reasons I became a writer, is because I needed more serotonin, I needed more dopamine, I needed more oxytocin in my life. I was going through a really challenging time, and part of, I think, what keeps us serene is using our voice for something we feel is valuable. And I think that's what's going to help us through, like you were saying, hard times, but also any challenging area of life. We have some caregivers on the group too. We need to take care of what's going to make us feel fulfilled first. And then, like the oxygen on the aircraft, then we can go out and help others. The serenity, though, is starting with us inside. It's helping us get what we need. And you mentioned a couple of different areas where you can do that.
Writing and painting, for me, are the 2 big ones. Yeah. But also just, I have to say, in this time that we're in right now, a friend said to me, Diane, pull out your bright colors. So I have the best time in the morning getting dressed. It's a creative endeavor to get dressed. And I'm putting together clothes that I normally wouldn't put together probably. And I'm thinking, well, my goodness, all these years in the closet, and look at this. I didn't think about that till the second, but that's a creative endeavor that tends to boost my feeling of just being in the day in a good way.
That you guys have captured something of everything that I've done all my life to get rid of tension. Grew up in a very violent household. I would run for endless miles. And I did this all the way through till now, 40 odd marathons in my life, ran for my high school team, college team. My left knee is hurt, so now I do 2 hours as hard as I can with an elliptical bike outside called an elliptico. Looks funny, but it's almost like running. So if I do that every day and I read every day and try to write, that makes me feel better. But I've always felt great guilt about my mom. She went homeless for a period of time. So one of my charities is a homeless shelter in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is where I wish she could have gone when she was a battered woman with no education, and she didn't have any ID, she didn't have any skills, she had nowhere to go. And it haunts me. So when I give to Barrett House and support them, that helps a lot. I also support Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Save the Children, and I've created a COVID-19 charity where I contribute to one on the Navajo Indian Reservation, because the Navajos, like other Indians in this country, have been hit very, very hard by COVID-19. So I find that combination of things to be very, very helpful. And it strikes me all of us have different elements of that that we've used in our lives. And therefore, we're a resource to other people. Our stories can lift other people up. And just your example of trying to go out into the world and be a soothing, calming force is a very positive thing. And now more than ever. And in my political life as a lobbyist, it's like living in a war zone. And so I have one motto. I'm on anybody's side who can have a reasonable conversation with me. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You can talk and be reasonable. I'll listen to you.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully find some place where we can come together. And right now that seems to be in very, very short supply.
You know, David, I mean, I'm not really involved in the way that you are, but I have to say that going back any number of years, and especially with Facebook and other social media and those conversations that can get very divisive at times.
Oh, it's for road rage.
That my challenge for myself has been to remain in the conversation, not reactively, but truly engaged in the conversation. And I've made some amazing friends who disagree with me considerably, and yet we'll go work on the same nonprofit together.
Yeah.
Because in spite of our differences, we're still wanting to be involved in the creating of good for the world and for the country.
That's a great point. In my firm, we have Republicans and Democrats. We have people that don't agree, and we've never had a fight. I tell people, if you're willing to talk about an issue that we're working on, whatever that issue is, and you can calmly tell me your side, I don't care who you like or don't like. Just stick with what's the right thing to do, what makes sense to do, and how would you broach your idea with the other side of any argument in a way that they hear you and can respond to you in kind. And with that, our office gets along great. As a minority, I was a minority kid on an Indian reservation. I learned an incredible amount about human nature. By the end, we're the best of friends, and we still are. My friends that are there, drop in on them anytime. It's just like it was when we were kids.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a powerful thing if you can find a way to bridge the differences, and you don't have to tell somebody how much they're a horrible person because they think A or B or C, whatever it is. Because if you break the ideas under it, there really isn't the difference that that I think social media and the media and even some of the political parties make it out to be. For them, if they can push any point to the extreme, they get more readers, more viewers, but it's not the right way to go.
Mm-hmm. You're right, David. I think a lot of times when we go to the one layer below the political and say, you know, you love families, so do I. And let's figure out what we have in common around families rather than talking about, you know, the political side to it. We realize we have a lot more in common. And the other thing, I think talking to each other in a way that we would want to be spoken to during these conversations, you know, with love, despite what people feel, is really empowering. And I know on my Facebook page, I always, if I post something, an article or something, I've started to say, please don't insult each other. Let's just have productive conversations. And it's really helped be less divisive and just really hear each other. And then one other thing that I'm sorry, David, what were you saying?
Couldn't agree more. But a lot of the people in the political world, I'll try to get to know enough about them. You know, what are your kids doing? What are your hobbies? What do you do? And I find if you can do that, even if it's just a couple of minutes, I try to do that with everybody I work with, including the people in my building. So you walk out the door, you know, hope your kid does well at Little League and hope you crochet whatever you're crocheting and have a great hike. And, you know, when you run into somebody, even if you don't agree with them totally, you're not their enemy, you're their friend. They're trying to figure out how to get together with you. And if you get to a point where you can't go further, you just say, oh, well, I guess that's when we just have to sit aside. But I find that works every time if you start from that perspective. But there's not a whole lot of that going on where I live. And I don't know when it gets better, but I sure hope so.
I think we learn a lot about ourselves too when we have those conversations. And this is the time, I mean, so much rests on having these important and difficult conversations. And I think that it's important to have them because we also understand ourselves better, and we get to know ourselves better, not only the other person, but, you know, what is the fine tuning to this point I'm trying to make. And for me, it gives me going back to serenity, I get a lot of serenity when I say what I feel. You know, even if it's hard, if I don't say what I feel, then I don't feel good about myself.
Yeah, I just want to reflect on how we treat ourselves to start with, because serenity, part of it is really organizing yourself in your daily life, in your practices, with your own emotions, with maybe how scared you are at this time. Maybe how some events have really frightened you, and maybe you're speaking out of a place that's really a heightened place. And so one of the things that I was going to talk about in view of serenity is maybe to take some time offline. There's a lot being expressed online. It's not very maybe thought through and processed. People are very emotional. It's fine to be angry when it's safe. It's hard to deal with when it's just put out there publicly. And so just these, you know, for yourself practices that allow you to center yourself in some way. I do yoga. I get up in the morning. My daughter and I, the last 2 months, have been getting up either 5:30 or 7 o'clock and being on Zoom and doing yoga together and meditating. And it keeps us kind of responsible to do that. We support each other. We were on a very long journey, which is in my book, where I was a big caretaker in her life, and she had a long bout with Lyme disease. And so I think the other thing is that we have to keep recreating ourselves. We have to recreate the ways in which we do self-care as times change, as family constellations change, as you grow in yourself. one of the things that I was thinking about this is that it's not really a particular discipline, but I think having beauty in your day is really important. Just having a moment where you adore a flower that's growing in your garden, or you walk by something, or something your family member says to you is quite stunning. All of us love lines and words and images that come from words and speaking and reading. And so I was thinking about that. And the other thing that really helps me is being in nature. And sometimes the best part of being in nature is to not be in my mind, thinking about what I have to do, how we're going to take care of the kids, how the world is going to right itself, and just being kind to my neighbors, regardless, as you've all been saying, of who thinks what.
It's the little things, I think. Well said.
Mm-hmm.
So that leads us into the next question, which is, what role do you believe activism plays, if any, in finding serenity in life?
Well, I say it plays a big role if it's constructive. I think a lot of people get on social media and they think because they blasted somebody that they've done some great deed. To me, activism is putting your money where your mouth is. I mean, for me, it's the charities, and I go to like Barrett House, where in Albuquerque, the homeless shelter. I spend a day with them, bring them a check. I talk to them. I find out what they need, what do they have not enough of, what could they do more of. And I find that's constructive. And I think a lot of social activism, hope I'm not being too controversial, is very destructive because it's just verbal road rage. It is not helping. People ought to share daily acts of kindness. If their philosophy is to be kind, go out and do that. Spend an hour at a homeless shelter instead of an hour on Facebook blasting everybody that you think is different than you. You've not accomplished anything when you've done that. That's my opinion anyway. So
I'm with
I feel
David.
much better when I actually do something and I think I know the people that were helped by that something. And whether it's Big Brothers, Big Sisters, homeless shelter, helping the Navajos I got people all over the country sending them masks, sending them antiseptic wipes, doing all kinds of things for them. And every one of them helped somebody. So that's just me.
I've been making masks to give away, David, and it's been part of this long years of ongoing creative endeavor. I've wound up with yards and yards and yards of fabric that I had pulled and stored and stuck away in my studio for one project or another. And so I have plenty of supplies. And I finally was able to order enough elastic. And I'm having the best time making these masks to just give away. So if you need one, let me know. I'll send you a mask.
I think you made my case way better than I did.
Well, but it's this creative endeavor. It's part of that creative, and part of the creativity for me is not just the initial. And I'll tie this into what we're talking about expressing how you really feel, which I do think is extremely important. I think it's also extremely important that we never express ourselves and the real feelings in a way that is hurtful or destructive to others. So for me, a lot of times expressing those feelings is a matter of going outside and doing something. And I find that those feelings disappear.
The quickest way, when I was in a really tough spot, I share it in my book, The High Performance Detox. I got really good at being what everybody else wanted me to be, and it brought me to a really low place. And I was never satisfied. Is this enough? Am I enough? What else can I do? I had to get out of my own head. So with recent situations, when I got really down on what situations or circumstances some people are being placed in because of what's going on in the world now, it made me sad. I really got down about it. So I did just what David said. I went right to the homeless shelter that we have here in Dallas, and I looked up a few of my favorites. We actually have a few. I take this one exit in town, and I see this one gentleman all the time. So we've built a relationship, and I'm protective of it, and I definitely protect myself, but we have a little relationship. And so I went to check in with him, and for 12 hours, I just got out of my own head and I got out of my own emotion, and it was so healing. And so along with sharing your voice and speaking up when you feel it's appropriate in a respectful way, I think it is going out and doing the action. Words, we all love words, like we've said before, but being in action is magical. It's powerful. And I'm going to remember that if it gets hard again, which it probably will, if I start to get down about anything in the world, I'm going to go take some action and be a part of the solution that I think Diane was talking about. It's if you're a part of creating something that can be a solution for somebody, I mean, that's our power. And so I really just try to stay in that spirit with everything.
Love it.
Yeah.
I kind of like that what you said there, Lacey, about taking action too, because I'm looking at this activism in a little bit of a different way, because I'm looking at it through the caregiver's eyes. And my idea of being an activist in my world is to be an advocate. Yeah. And for that, I need to advocate for David every step of the way. When he was in the hospital, with obviously the book Prisoners Without Bars, A Caregiver's Tale, is about our journey through that. And so, and I'm still his advocate, or I'm still active, being active about his care even now. For example, and to make our life more fulfilling, to bring more serenity into our life, I look for ways to make David's life more enjoyable. Because frankly, when his life is enjoyable, I'm going to reap those benefits too. So I often anticipate his needs, or I think I try to let other people know what he can and cannot do, so it makes it a little bit easier on him. And at one point, I found a recumbent trike, which he rides in the neighborhood, and he does that several days a week, when it's not 114 degrees like it is right now in the desert. But this gives him a sense of freedom. And especially because of his balance disability, he is able to leave the house without me, which is not something he could do under normal circumstances. So I'm also an advocate for caregivers. So not only just for David, but also for caregivers, because Lord knows we know there are tons of them in the world. And I'm not just talking about caregivers for brain injury. I'm talking about caregivers for any aspect. And if you're a mom, you're a caregiver. If you're a dad, you're a caregiver. But in the more health-related forms, it gets to be really kind of intense. So I emphasize the role of caregiving and helping and being an advocate on my blog, which is called survivingtraumaticbraininjury.com, and also on my radio show, which is Another Fork in the Road, and it's on the Brain Injury Radio Network, which I host twice a month, and also in my speaking engagements. So that's what I'm saying to you. You know what David said and what Lacey said is that you have to get out of there, get out of your own self, and help other people. And that's one of those are the ways that I do it. And one important point that I always make is to take time for yourself. Mm-hmm. I mentioned that earlier, but what I do is when I'm talking with audiences, I always pass out what I call me time stones. Let me show you them. I have some right here, because I always do. They are just little tiny stones, little black polished stones. This one's actually David's. I had to steal his to get an extra one. This is another one of David's. He keeps them in his pockets all the time. Just little tiny stones. This one's mine. and I have a bunch of them everywhere. And what the purpose for those, so I pass them out to my audience. And the purpose for those is to just to remind yourself to take care of you. Because as I said earlier, if you don't take care of you, you can't take care of anybody else. So if I don't have the energy or whatever, the wherewithal to do the radio shows or the blog, I'm not going to be able to help. So those are some ways that I try to advocate or be an activist in my life. And I keep these little stones everywhere in my pocket. I keep them in the bathroom vanity, the car, by my computer, because I spend most of my life next to my computer. And I like those stones to remind folks to basically take time for themselves, and it'll make them happier. It'll make them happier and more fulfilled. And frankly, that leads to more serenity in life. When you're happy, you're going to be happier around there. And when David's happy, I'm going to be happier too.
So, I've noticed that everybody's been bringing up these phenomenal social justice or activism that they're doing right now and in general in their lives. And I do a lot of activism around violence, overcoming violence, also lost and found voices, which, that can apply to anybody who has experienced something that is caused them to lose their own voice. But I'm thinking a lot of the study that I read, and the study basically said, if you're doing a lot of work, too much work, you're going to be less healthy than if you're not doing a lot of work. However, if you're doing work that you absolutely love because it brings meaning into your life, then actually it reduces the negative effects to a point that you're actually going to be healthier than those people who are not doing a lot, but maybe they're not excited about their lives or they're not doing meaningful things. And I think about this when I do social justice work, because it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy, but it is actually something that brings a lot of people serenity. And the reason it does is probably because of the endorphins that we were talking about earlier. And when you're doing something that you love, it almost doesn't feel like work and it doesn't stress you out. If I'm doing social justice work, I just feel as though I'm on fire and I don't feel as though it's work. So I think it gives me a lot of peace, a lot of satisfaction, makes me feel good about the world. It brings me close to people. It makes me feel as though I have community, and it's absolutely stunning. So it brings serenity to. I feel the serenity when you're all talking about your own social justice work and your own activism.
So going off of what you just said, for me, working with people and helping people who have various life circumstances that have caused trauma, including the one that we're in now that everyone is being exposed to, and the ways in which we cope or we don't, or we get socially frightened to even go out and do things because it's too terrifying because of the virus, or because, you just don't have a lot of feelings of being safe in the world. And so this is kind of where I've put my activism, is to help people have skills for dealing with trauma. My daughter and I were in the Lyme world, and my book is very helpful, I think, in view of families dealing with not only chronic illness, but the very mysterious ways in which one can recover from Lyme disease, and that, being clear about being your own advocate or advocating for your loved one is really part of the journey. And it's okay, and it's wonderful, and it's good to know that that's what you need to be doing. And be mindful of what you're told to do or in treatment, and, take stock of how that's working, and have a voice. And so, I think in my life, the the ways in which I stay centered enough to help people with their traumas and to be able to hear all the things that go on that have affected them that are very devastating. Takes good tools, and you know, I might do a whole yoga set on inner anger and do my punching and rhythmic breathing and all that, and I'm set for the day. And whoever needs my help can have a person who can be in a state of serenity enough that the field is calm enough to help them. And I feel like it's an exchange, that why we feel good when we're serving is because it's healing to both people.
That's a lovely note to end on. Thank you to all our panelists, and for our viewers, remember to subscribe and also check out the panelists' YouTube channels linked in the description below. The Abolitionist's Daughter, All the Silent Spaces, Dancing in the Narrows, Prisoners Without Bars, The Pale-Faced Lie, and High Performance Detox are available on Amazon, links below, as well as links to each panelist's website. Thank you so much for sharing with us today.
I enjoyed being
Thank
with you.
you all.
Thank
you.
you. Really enjoyed it.